Hej, jeg hedder Stefan, og til daglig kan du finde mig i studieafdelingen i København. Det er en stor ære i dag at kunne lave det her lille interview med en af synthesizer-pionererne, nemlig Dave Smith fra USA. Og af gode grunde så er interviewet her på engelsk, så jeg håber, at I følger godt med. So Dave,
yes,
thanks a lot for taking the time to do this interview.
My pleasure.
It's a huge honor for someone like me who's been a synthesizer aficionado for many years to actually get to meet you and do this interview. So thanks.
Great.
You have been doing this for a long time. First, could you maybe start describing how you got into dabbling with synthesizers in the first place?
Well, I had a background as a musician, played in bands, guitar and bass in college, that sort of thing. And I also had a technical degree. I got a degree from University of California at Berkeley in electrical engineering and computer science. So when synthesizers first came out, somebody told me there was a store that had this synthesizer in it, so I went and looked at it, and it was a Minimoog. And I had no idea what it did or how it worked, but it looked really cool.
Right.
And it kind of attracted me from both the music and the technology point of view. So I bought it, not knowing what it did. And this was in 1972. And that was my introduction to synthesizers.
That's the year I was born, so
don't rub it in.
There you go. Right. So many of probably our young customers don't really know that before Dave Smith Instruments there was something called Sequential Circuits, which was your first company.
Yes.
Can you talk about how that got started?
Well, when I bought the Minimoog, after a while I started building little things to run with it, little toys of different kinds just for my own use. And at one point I built a full analog sequencer just for my own use. And I said, well, when I got done with it, I thought maybe some other people would want to have the same kind of thing. So I started a company called Sequential Circuits and to sell them. And I think I sold 4 of them or something.
Right.
This was like 1973, 1974. So that was how I started. I was still working as an engineer full-time and just doing this in evenings and weekends. So next I built a digital sequencer, and then I built a programmer unit, and eventually I quit my real job and jumped in full-time, and that's when I developed the Prophet 5, which came out in 1978.
As I understand it, you had a big hand in developing the MIDI system. You and Tom Oberheim were kind of talking about that and got some of the bigger players along. How did that happen?
Well, it was a very long story, but basically we had all been talking to each other, Kakahashi-san at Roland, Tom and others, and we would just get together and talk at trade shows. We realized that we needed to have a common standard because everybody had their own interfaces. Sequential had one, and Roland had one, and Oberheim had one, but they wouldn't talk to each other. So I decided to get aggressive about it and gave a paper at the Audio Engineering Society convention, AES convention in 1981, saying that we should have a standard interface and actually presented a starting point. And then I organized a meeting at the NAMM show a few months later and invited all the companies that made keyboards at the time to come. And that was kind of the start of it, just trying to get, everybody knew we had to do it, but not everybody wanted to get involved. So in the end, it was Sequential Circuits and Roland, and then Yamaha, Korg, and Kawai were also involved to a lesser degree, and then those 5 companies ended up actually developing what became MIDI.
You've had a lot of collaboration with other people like Roger Lynn and Dave Rossum from EMU Systems. As I understand, that was a collaboration that led to the first sort of programmable memory stuff?
Not really. With EMU, what happened is I had bought some technology from them for a programmer unit that I was making, and then at one point when I decided to build the Prophet 5, Dave Rossum was part of the design team that developed the solid-state music integrated circuits. They had a VCO chip and a VCF and envelope generators and VCAs, and I knew when I found out about it, I decided I could probably build a polyphonic synth using that. But I developed all the software for it and designed most of the circuitry, and then they helped somewhat on some of the analog stuff using their chipset. And so that's how that came about.
Right, but it was the first memory-equipped synthesizer, right?
Yes, it was the first fully polyphonic programmable synthesizer.
Right.
So the Prophet 5 was just the first product that put it all together. Before that, mini Moogs were not programmable, and they were only one voice. And Tom Oberheim had built some 4 voices, but they were pretty complex and big and not that easy to use. So this just kind of put it all together for the first time.
So if you take a trip down memory lane and think about all the big stuff that happened, what would you describe as probably the biggest thing in your career?
Ooh, that's hard to do. I guess I always go back to the Prophet 5 because that was the first keyboard I made. So there's always a special place in your heart for the first thing that you do. But there's been so many other products of different kinds that it's like good example, Pro 2, the Prophet 12, the Prophet 6 we just came out with, the Tempest that I worked on with Roger. You really can't compare them. So it's like picking a favorite child. You can't say you're my favorite because it's just too hard. I would the whole MIDI thing. I people know about that, but I've never really think too much about that because I'm an instrument designer and that's what I want to be known for. And the MIDI thing is just something we kind of did in the meanwhile that had to be done. But I kind of tend to be more interested in the products and the instruments.
Right, so you're still at the forefront of the design and development phase yourself? And,
well, we have a very small company. It's not that many of us, so it's and everybody who works there loves synthesizers, and business is very good for us, so we have the advantage of being able to do whatever we want and what we think is fun. So we don't have a marketing department, we don't have a big sales department, so we don't have all these people telling us what has to be done. So we're not a market-driven company. We're a product-driven company. We build what we want to build, what we think would be cool, what our customers, we hope, will think is cool and unique, and not something just from a spec sheet or, we have to have something at this price point or whatever. Right. So it's pretty fun that way.
You're probably quite alone these days with that kind of passion for actual products, and not so much the whole marketing stuff.
Well, it's been kind of my target. You mentioned I had the company before, and Sequential, we had a couple hundred people, and it was just, it's not as much fun running a company like this. So this time I consciously decided to not make the company huge and not grow overnight, and just take everything very slowly and just kind of do it that way. And it's turned out, by luck or whatever, to be a good business plan.
Right.
And it's really paid off that way.
There was a big pause, really, from when Sequential sadly went out of business until you started Dave Smith Instruments. Was there a reason? Did you abandon the whole thing altogether, or it was?
No, nothing that severe. Actually, initially I worked for about a year for Yamaha, and then I actually started the Korg R&D group in San Jose in California, and it's actually still there, and that's where they've designed a lot of the big Korg products, the Kronos, a lot of that technology was all developed at that location. So I started there and worked for Korg for a few years. In the mid-90s, I worked for a company called Seer Systems, where we actually developed the world's first software synthesizers. So I was always involved with synthesizers on one level or another, but there just wasn't a company that I had that was building products. And in fact, the whole Seer Systems experience, we had a product called Reality, which is, like I said, the first professional music soft synth, and people didn't understand what that meant, and it took a long time to explain it to them. But I also realized after a couple of years that I didn't really like software as a musical instrument. There's advantages. There's a ton of advantages. I don't want to say that software is bad. It allows people to stay in the box. It's cheap or free, and it sounds good in general. So there's a lot of advantages. But as a musical instrument, to me, I just like having something in front of me where if I grab this knob, it does one thing, and it does that same thing today, tomorrow, 20 years from now, whatever. I mean, as we know, people are still buying vintage synths now from 30, 40 years ago, and it's because it's got a certain sound and everything does the same thing. It's very predictable, and it's you don't get that out of software. If you buy a software synth now, it won't work in 10 years. I mean, because the computers change. So that's when I started thinking about hardware. So I started this company in 2002 just to get back into hardware for that reason.
So yeah, we are waiting for the Prophet 6 now. And I must be honest and say, when I heard the very first demo that you did online, that was, I mean, I love the instruments in general, but that sound, I don't know what you did with that, so I'm really looking forward to getting that first unit in. And I have to say, it's the first time in many years that I'm seriously considering shelling out that kind of money for a hardware synth. So job well done.
Well, thank you.
How do you see the development and the future of the company beyond the Prophet 6? What's next for DSI?
There's no shortage of products to be built. I mean, we always have more ideas. Again, we're a small company, so we do maybe one big product every 9 months or a year. So we're not cranking things out, and we try to do things that are different, so that we don't keep redoing versions of the same thing. So we have some ideas. We're working on something that we hope to announce probably at NAMM, and another interesting product we think for a year from now. But of course, we never talk about what we do until it's ready to show it. But the Prophet 6 did come out really well. I mean, you never quite know when you're building it. You think you know what you're doing, but until the whole instrument's done, you just never know, because it's a package deal. It's the sound, it's the feel, it's the interaction as a musician. I mean, the whole thing. And if you like the YouTube of the Prophet 6, you're really going to like having the real thing in front of you, because it's like what we were talking earlier. You can only get so much out of a YouTube demonstration, and it's something else to have it in front of you. And pretty much everybody who's played the Prophet 6 is just blown away by. It's like, wow. I mean, it just makes you smile, and it just takes you so many different directions. It's really pretty cool.
One last question.
Sure.
I've been wondering about this. I'm sure there's a story to it. You have each of your videos in the background, you can kind of see a whiskey bottle standing there. What's that all about?
Well, it's not whiskey, it's tequila. That's an important difference.
Right.
I don't know that there's any plot there or any big story. It's just something we started doing. We do tend to have a lot of tequila around the office. I suppose you can call that our company liquor of choice. Actually, that even goes back to the Sequential days. So it just, I think one time it probably showed up accidentally, and then we kind of said, oh, that looks kind of cool, and people would notice it. So every time we put in, I think, a different bottle just to mix it up. And also we have our little shot glasses that we have, which, for each of our different products, we have a new shot glass, so that goes well with the tequila. So we try to put one of those in there too.
Right.
But it's not whiskey. So
okay, thanks for clearing that up.
We got to clarify that.
Well, Dave, thanks very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure.